These are the pattern pieces that you will need to cut out your half-scale jacket blazer. Starting with number 1 is your jacket front, number 2 your jacket back, number 3 your upper sleeve, number 4 your lower sleeve. Then we have our front facing, our double welt pocket, or pocketing rather, upper double welt piping, under collar template, back facing, upper collar, lower collar, upper front interfacing, your back lining, your lower sleeve lining, upper sleeve lining, front lining, front interfacing, and then your single welt reinforcement, welt pocketing, and interfacing. And how you are going to lay them out to be cut for your half-scale jacket pattern. So make sure you are measuring all your grain lines to either your fold or your selvage after you have folded your fabric selvage to selvage. So I'm going to place a pin into the fabric on one end, and then I'm going to measure my grain line, and then from there I'm going to measure up, making sure I have the exact same number, and then I'll slide the pattern until I have the exact same number, and then from there I will place a pin into the fabric. When you're placing those pins, try not to distort the fabric as much as possible, but it is a little hard on this cardstock. Ideally with cardstock, you would take your pattern and trace around it like this, and then you can use that as your means of getting your pattern transferred onto your fabric, and then from there you can cut everything out. Okay, so make sure you mark all of your notches as well as all your circle placements. So I'll have to hole punch these and then do that, but you can now see that I can cut that out. With the holes now cut out, you can take your chalk and just mark them. And then when you go to do your tailor tacks, you will make them go through all layers. Okay, so our next step is to cut everything out and put our thread tacks in. So I've cut a few pieces out already, and I'm going to show you how I cut things out. And I have one that I had forgotten to cut out because I do need 2 pieces. There are a few pieces I haven't cut out yet because I either need to cut them on a fold or they're just a cut one. And since my fabric's doubled, I don't want to cut them out yet. Okay, so to cut out, if you're right-handed, you're going to cut out counterclockwise. That way the blade isn't obscuring your view. You're just going to lift up your fabric and cut around, rotating your scissors around. And as you cut, just make sure you line up your scissors with the part that you stopped at, and also open and close your blade as much as possible. This will keep your scissors sharp, and hopefully with practice you will have nice clean cuts. So you're just going to keep moving those scissors around and cutting counterclockwise for right-handed, clockwise if you're left-handed and are using left-handed scissors. So that way the blade's not obscuring your view. Now also notice how I folded the fabric back to get into here so that I can get right into that fold, and then I'll fold it back down. Try to not move your fabric as much as possible, keeping your scissors on the table. So having a pair of scissors with a bent blade is actually better than having a pair of scissors that is just straight. Now I've gotten to a point where I either have to twist very uncomfortably to get to this point, or I can cut this off and carefully rotate my pattern piece. If you have stretch or very slippery fabric, I do not recommend this. So I just rotated my piece, made sure that everything's still in line, and then that way I can still cut counterclockwise all the way around. Now the bottom of this does have a small S curve, so make sure you're not cutting that straight because it is needed so that the fabric comes down and appears to be straight on your wrist. When I get this cut out, then I'm going to show you how to do the tailor tacks and mark my notches. So I've already marked them with chalk, but that chalk is iron off and can easily become ironed off. If you use talc chalk, it can rub off. If you use an iron off pen, it could rub off. And if you use a water erase marker, it can also come off. So just using a tailor tack helps you get those marks to stay. So I've already done them on these pieces. So you can see on the inside, I have my tailor tacks. Now I have 4 marks on this, 4 dots on this, marking my hem placement and some parts that I'm going to match it to the undersleeve. And I'm just going to go into my dot and out again, making sure I go all the way through to that other layer. And I'm going to leave a tail. Then I'm going to go in at a cross angle from what I just did, and again make sure you go all the way through and leave a large loop. Then go in one more time just like you did the first time, across, again leaving a large loop. Then when you pull these apart, you will take your scissors and just cut that, and then those will stay. If you have a little tail left over, you can pull that out, but you should have threads sticking out onto the right side of the garment. So I'm going to show you that one more time. And it's good to thread a whole bunch of needles ahead of time because you're going to be doing a lot of these. But it will save you a lot of time later on because you'll have your marks and hopefully your threads won't come out. So I went in once, I'm going to go crosswise, in and out again, making sure you can see it on both sides. Leave a loop and then go back in the way you went in initially, leaving loops, pull them apart, cut in the middle, pull your thread out or your needle out. Okay, then to mark my notches, I have 5 notches on this pattern. Do a little clip about 1/8 of an inch. Don't do more than 1/8 of an inch. Otherwise it will either cause damage to your seam allowance, which we do not want, or it will, and you want to make sure you get at least 1/8 of an inch, so you don't want to go too short. So just confirming on my pattern here. Yeah, so I did have 2 here that I thought, but the other one wasn't marked as well. So 2 there, 1 there, 1 there, and do make sure you get both. If you're serging something and you're notching like this, it does kind of disappear, but you can still see them. So that is how you're going to do your thread tacks and your notching. I still have 2 more thread tacks to do, so I'll do it one more time just to show you. I'm going to go in and out, leaving a long tail, in and out on the cross, making sure to go all the way through and leaving a long loop, and then back in the way I came initially, in and out. I am doubling my thread. It does make it a little easier, but it's not necessary. It just makes it easier so you don't lose everything when you're trying to get it done. It uses up more thread, but this is a great opportunity to use that old rotten thread that you shouldn't be using in your machine anyway. So if you have anything that belonged to your grandmother, don't use it on your machine. It isn't good enough to sew garments with, and it will make the seams will rip and pop and fall apart. But it's great for basting. Now also, while I'm at it, again, I took my pattern piece, I placed it on here measuring my grain line from the fold, and then I marked around it using my chalk. Then I'm going to take that and I'm going to cut it out right inside my line, because that is actually where my pattern was. That way you don't accidentally make your pieces bigger than they should be. When I get to an odd angle, I'm going to rotate that around, preferably not drag it like I just did, but this is a small piece so I can get away with it. You actually want to lift and set down. Dragging can distort the fabric. And then my last cut. Now this is for my piping, and later on I do want to make sure that I'm paying attention to the grain line of my piping. So I'm going to go ahead and draw an arrow in the direction that represents down on my piping, and then I'll flip it over. So flip it over like the pages of a book, not like a notebook, okay? So if I flip it over like a notebook, my arrow goes in the other direction. If I flip it over like a book, then my arrow stays in the same direction. So, okay, versus up and down, okay? So that's important to keep track of, especially if your fabric has any type of nap. It will show later if you aren't careful about that. So my next step will be to take all my pieces here and then lay them out on a single layer, which I've measured over from my fold since I cut my selvage off, and I've put 2 pins, and I'll fold on that, and then that will become my fold line for these pieces that I need to cut on a fold, and I'll be able to cut my single layers as well. Okay, so our next step, like I mentioned, is to cut out those pieces that I only need 1 of. So my back facing, my upper collar, my upper double welt piping, and my welt for my single welt pocket. So I'm going to cut these. So I already traced around my pattern pieces, and I noticed I needed to make a little edit, so I fixed that and traced everything, and now I'm going to be cutting this out. So again, opening and closing your scissors completely to make sure that you keep your scissors sharp and your cuts are as smooth as possible. It does take time to get good at cutting, but with time you will get there. Just really be mindful of where your blade is going with each cut. Now these 2 pieces, again, I want to make sure I pay attention to that, to my nap, but I don't want to mark it on the right side of the fabric, which is what this is. So I'm going to flip it over like the pages of a book, and I'm going to mark that like that. So when I finish cutting it out, it'll be marked. And again, I'm going to do that with my single welt so that it's easy to do. So I'm just going to be cutting this out just inside that chalk line because that's where my pattern was. And then it's a good idea to pin your pieces to your pattern so that you know what is what and it doesn't get lost. So just pin that in place for now, and then that way you have it and you won't lose it. And I'm going to cut out my welt for my single welt pocket. If your scissors are dull, your fabric's going to slip on the blade, so just make sure that you keep your scissors nice and sharp. And again, I've already marked it so I know which side's what. So this is the right side. So notice I put cut 1 fashion fabric right side because this does have a very specific angle, and if you cut it this way, this point will not fit on the left side pocket where it's supposed to. It'll be pointing, the high side will be on the wrong side. Okay, so then again, I'm going to cut out counterclockwise because I'm right-handed and I'm using right-handed scissors, and then that way I can see what I'm doing the whole way, keeping my scissors on the table as much as possible. It helps me stabilize them and keep my cutting smooth. I got really close to there, but I'm okay. And I have one more, but to make this a little easier for myself, I'm just going to cut it out roughly, and then I can start on this fold going counterclockwise. Here, I do have a curve here, so I want to fold that up out of my way as I go around my curve, just so I can get in there nice and smooth with my scissors. There we go. Okay, so, and I'm going to show you one more time those thread tacks now that we have a slightly close-up view. So I'm going to go right in to my hole and out again, and making sure that I can see that needle on the wrong side, or the other side, not the wrong side. I'm going to go crosswise in and out, and then back through the same way I came. Not the exact same hole, but close. And then I'm going to pull that until my loops are about the same size. Split this apart and cut, and then remove my needle. So one more time on here. I'm going to go in and out. And I do recommend getting used to using a thimble. It's awkward to start, but it makes a huge difference for your fingers when they start bleeding because you're hand sewing so much. Also, don't cut your threads too long. You should only have it about the length of one arm, otherwise you're exercising, you're not sewing. So, and you'll be spending more time untangling your thread than you will sewing. So, tips for sewing: make sure you use a thimble, don't cut your thread too long, and that way you will save yourself a lot of time. So again, I'm just going to replace this pattern on top of my piece here. Oh, I haven't marked my notches yet. So I'm going to use an iron-off pen this time instead of my chalk. So I'm just going to line up my pattern piece again and take my iron-off pen and just put a little mark there and a little mark there. And I've notched this pattern out so I could get my marks in easily. Or I can also clip that 1/8 of an inch on both pieces. Okay, and then I don't have any notches on any other pieces, and I finished marking my tailor tacks.